You manifested $1 million basically overnight.
5 days.
5 days.
Yeah.
Give or take. So start with telling us a little bit about that story, and then I want to dig deeper into the process of manifesting.
Okay. So to give people context, I was paid $1 million for a 1-year coaching contract. Yes, that's true. And the process which led to there. So many people get hung up on that. Right. They're like, what? How? What? Few people ask the really important question is, how did you become a match to that? Because it wasn't winning the lottery. Someone actually said, your coaching is worth $1 million. Yeah. How did that process happen? And that process was one of about 14, 15 months. And really was me facing off with all of my beliefs, insecurities, fears around money and abundance, and understanding the energetics of money and what it really is and how to make it, and upgrading my space, my physical space, moving into an ocean view home. And I only had, with my partner at the time, and I had first month's rent and security deposit. I did not have the money to pay second month's rent. And at the time, so the rent was $6,000 a month. And so I had 3. And that was at the time, I'd never paid anywhere close to that. Our previous apartment had been $2,100 that we shared and split. So suddenly now I need to pay $3,000 a month plus living. I just didn't know how I was going to do it. But moving into that space and knowing it was necessary for me to expand. And I had a woman on my podcast on the deep dive. Her name is Marcy Locke. And how I was an Encinitas at the time, and she was known for being paid $1 million from multiple clients. She coached people from like the Walmart family. And so that's how she was talked about as the $1 million mentor. And I had her sit in front of me at my house, and I interviewed her on my podcast. And I said, I don't even know how you say that with a straight face. The idea of me telling someone it's $1 million to work with me makes me uncomfortable, and I can't, how? And she left after that conversation, and it bothered me. I was so bothered by the fact that, why couldn't I charge $1 million? Why? What is that going on inside of myself? And that began a real process of inquiry over the next year of so many different stories I could tell you about money in various different ways. But trust me when I say it was just a complete gauntlet initiation around money over and over and over. And then I went into an ayahuasca ceremony, and this was part of somewhat of an initiation of a series of ceremonies over the course of several months, where I was asked to surrender various aspects of things of myself. So I surrendered my bank account, for example, all my money. And I surrendered my...
What do you mean when you say you surrendered your bank account?
I was asked, so I'd just gotten out of debt. I'd been in debt. Literally, when I moved into that house, I was in $20,000 of debt from paying for a surgery from a car accident, and I had to put it on my credit card. I'm carrying $20,000 in debt from a surgery that I'm going to get a settlement for, but it's in legal that took 2 years. Mm-hmm. So meanwhile, I'm carrying $20,000 in debt for almost 2 years. And I could afford the lifestyle. Here I was in an ocean view home, and I managed to earn that money and all this stuff, but I couldn't seem to get over the hump to pay that off. Mm-hmm. And I finally did. I got there, and I had, I don't know, like $30,000 in my bank account. I'm like, yes. And that's a big shift, right? $20,000 in debt to $30,000 in the bank account in less than a year. That alone was a really big deal. And then Spirit asked me to make a spoken word poetry album. And it was like a $20,000 investment. And it was all my money that I'd just gotten. It was like, no, I just finally feel good. And in an ayahuasca ceremony, I was told to make this album. And I finally realized, I went, okay, everything I have is because of you, Spirit, God. When I'm my most magnetic, when I attract clients, opportunities, whatever, it's when I'm really spiritually connected. When I feel truly aligned, that's when those opportunities come. And so I realized everything I have is because of spirit, God, the divine. If I cut that off, I'm not getting clients, I'm not getting opportunities. So really, it's not even my money, it's God's money. So I surrendered it and I made a contract, an agreement. This is something I do regularly, not regularly, but with big things, I make contracts. And my contract was, I will spend every dollar that I have, literally every single one, doing what I am told to do, as long as it's made super clear and I have the resources to do it. And so that was in ceremony, an agreement that was made, which ultimately, by the way, is why I made The Art of Choosing Love. Mm-hmm. I spent a shit ton of money. You know, production costs. I flew around the world with a 3-man team, paying all of their flights. It was a very expensive thing to do because I was told to do it. And I'd made that contract and I was tested around that. But so that was an example of surrendering the bank account. And then there was examples of surrendering my physical health and identity and literally dying in ceremony, which is its own story. And like literally dying, my consciousness leaving my body. And then this other ceremony, I was asked to surrender my mind. It's like time to let that go. And I lost my mind for 5 hours. Just completely lost it, bro. And at the end of that, I sort of come out of that experience and the medicine said to me, you have now gone with this whole gauntlet. You've now gone where 99.9999% of this population will never be willing to go. And that makes you priceless. It is now $1 million to work with you. Claim it. And I'm up on top of a mountain in a teepee in the pitch black, laying there in the middle, having just lost my mind for 5 hours, and it's silent. And I go, it is now $1 million to work with me.
Say it out loud.
Out loud into the ayahuasca ceremony. And the shaman goes, and may all the resources be used for the greatest good of all. You know? And then I'm just laying there and whoever knows how long later, the medicine says, you will have your first $1 million client by the end of the week. Claim it. Out loud. I will have my first $1 million client by the end of the week. And the moment I said that, 3 people popped into my head. And she said, it's one of these 3. And I'll shorten the story, but essentially actually, this is an important part of the story. I'm going to continue this. One of them was in that ceremony. And I found myself randomly the next morning, synchronistically in a conversation with that person. And I supported them. And I was like, I think I can really help you with what you're going through. And he said, I agree. And what does that look like? And I said, well, you heard it in ceremony. It's $1 million. And he said, well, like I would have to move stuff around. It's not just like in a bank account. And I said, well, you heard it in ceremony. You have until the end of the week. And he said yes. And we had another ceremony that next night. And I just went, what? Did I just make $1 million? What? And he said yes. And I went into that second ceremony and asked for a sign. I really asked for a sign and I got the sign and it's already done. I went, okay. And fast forward to 2 days later, I'm in conversation with the other person and they're in the midst of a breakdown. And I show up at their house and I say, hey, let me support you here. That leads to me saying again, I can support you. It's $1 million. They said yes. And I went home and I went, I just made $2 million in 2 days. What? And I meditated. And what became clear was it's only one. It's meant to be one. I was told it was one. And I felt more strongly about the second person. And so I composed an email and I said, I'm really sorry if you're already moving funds around and different things. But I was told it was only one. And I have someone else that said yes. And so I'm going to withdraw this offer of coaching. And if we work together in the future, amazing. But thank you for your trust and, sending you many blessings. And I think that's a really important piece to this story that isn't often focused on because of the flashiness of the $1 million, is also the willingness to withdraw the offer that someone said yes to and potentially say no to $1 million. Is part of the energetics of why it was given to me to begin with. And when we talk about money, when we understand that it's energy, it literally is just energy, and it's all a game. This is all made up. Literally, it used to be backed by gold. It's not anymore. Those numbers they're just numbers on a screen. It's all energy at this stage. And the understanding of that and the process of manifestation, because there is a process to it, unlocked something for me that later became my nonprofit that I founded. It became the Art of Choosing Love. It became the Create community. It became buying my parents a house. Like, it became so much beauty that wasn't really even about me and didn't make any sense. In hindsight, if you did what I did with $1 million, I'd say you're ridiculous. Like, that, what are you doing? That there's no business advisor on the planet that would tell me to do what I did with that money. And I freaked out at a certain point. And I reached out to a mentor and I said, I'm the dude that fucked it all up. Like, I'm that guy. I'm gonna be homeless and whatever. You know, I was just deep in it. And he said to me, have you followed what you feel you've been guided to do every step of the way? And I said, yes. And he said, great, that's your end of the contract. That's the reason you were given it, because you are the person who would do that even when it seems stupid. Doesn't make any sense, but that's what I'm being told to do.
Yeah.
I'm that person. And he said, that's the only reason you were given it. So don't ever beat yourself up for honoring your end of that contract. And that was really huge for me, really important.
Dang. Yeah, I mean, it's a trip. It's such a wild story that you just took us on, and that journey is, it must have been a trip to go through, obviously, let alone, you know, for everyone that's listening to this right now. It's such a stark contrast from, I think, most people's understanding or reality. It just seems like so far out of reach.
That's the reason I tell it, by
Right.
the way. When it happened, because you knew me when it happened, right? Or you weren't in the picture yet?
After, yeah.
Yeah, after. Okay. So one of the things, they said yes, and they transferred me $1 million 48 hours later. 5 days from the date of the ceremony, I was transferred $1 million in one lump sum. What I did with that was not touch it for 3 months. And every day I meditated and I paid attention to when we talked about the energetic threads of how, when my poem went viral and stuff, like, I paid attention to what was shifting in me. It literally is energy, right? And so that amount of energy entering into my reality all of a sudden was having a massive impact on my nervous system, on my perception of life, etc. The people, when they found out about it, all of a sudden there was a different energy towards me. Yeah. The amount of people, like the amount of guilt I felt if I didn't pay for everyone's lunch was wild. What? And then all of a sudden the people, like my partner at the time, asked me for money. It just became this thing, and I didn't touch it for 3 months. And it just sat there. I went, okay, what do I do? I Googled, what do you do with $1 million? I'm not kidding. That's a true story. I Googled, what do you do with $1 million? And the advice, by the way, is invested in some very safe things like some bonds and stocks, because just based on the interest alone, I could live a nice life, cover all my expenses basically just off of the interest of that $1 million investment. I don't know if that's true now, but being smart with that money, I wouldn't even have to necessarily work again if I was smart with that money. But that's not what I did with it. And so I think it's important for people, if there's a message that I want to get across to people, it's that the desire to have more money, why? Like, legitimately, why do you want more money? What will you do with it? What do you think is going to change about your life? I don't think enough people ask those questions. And I can tell you, as someone who got $1 million and then went into the deepest depression of his life and saw his relationship end and saw so much shift, I think that aspect is what I want people to start to think about, because when you call that energy in without having the container to hold it, it can fry your system.